Will the soundtrack kindly produce a sound? Go on. Don't be nervous. Go ahead. Any sound. Well, that isn't quite what I had in mind.
It's going again.
Are you going?
Yeah.
It's recording?
Yep.
Frick.
It's just detox for a second.
Yeah, let's just
breathe in, breathe out. Namaste.
So who are you voting for this year?
Oh, we're getting right into it. Let's go.
No, just kidding.
I actually think the Green Party's going to win this year.
The Green Party.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, dude.
I don't know if I do either, actually. The Green.
Yeah, it's like a very small, like.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, nobody votes for it. That's
okay. Yeah. Okay. I don't really understand how all that. Like, first of all, like, how do you form a party? Like, what all goes into that?
Yeah. Do you register somewhere?
Yeah. Dude, let's form a party.
Dude, let's start a party. Honestly. What would you call this party? Podcast party? We could be the podcast party.
Dude, that's got a nice ring.
Yeah.
Podcast party.
The alliteration goes crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We gotta break the two-party system, dude.
I just told Kevin before we started. I was like, no, let's not get talk about politics.
That's why I was like, oh, dang. Like,
that's why I brought it up.
Hey, Kevin, welcome to the Second Floor Experience, man. So thankful we made this happen finally.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I like to kind of give people context to where and how we met because I think it's always fun. And so we met you at the Austin Library downtown on the rooftop where you were just casually journaling in Hebrew. No big deal. And then we just sat down and we were doing some research. And Zach was actually about to trying to edit a podcast.
Yeah.
But the Wi-Fi wasn't having it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we struck up a conversation, man. And then you were really cool to talk to. So we wanted to invite you on, hear a little bit more about your story. You have some cool stuff that we want to get into. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really, really cool to see you guys again. I think everything happens for a reason, so I think it's really cool that like the way that we met, it happened. And you know, you were like studying like it was tithing, right? You were studying tithing.
I was doing like some general researching for a like young adults teaching I was going to do on a particular passage, but I think we ended up talking about a few different things. Yeah. Too, because you just asked, you're like, hey, what are you doing? Yeah. So I think that's cool. I wish, honestly, kind of wish more people would do that. Just to be open and be like, hey, what do you like? Tell me about yourself. It doesn't have to be. I think people are afraid to be sold something, or they're afraid like to be taken advantage of, or maybe someone's hitting on them or something. Yeah. But like, I don't know. I appreciate that you did that because I like talking about.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Some people are just afraid to be like awkward. Mm-hmm. Like they're afraid it's just gonna be awkward, but it doesn't have to be. Hey man, how you doing? You know, that's it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things we want to do with like our future coffee shop idea is to have a place where people can come to connect instead of just like isolate with people. Because sometimes I feel like we're with people, but we're isolating ourselves still. So I think it'd be cool to have a place that we can come and just meet people like you.
Yeah.
Have that happen.
No, I think your idea with the signs too that you talked about were, you know, kind of indicating, you know, hey, I'm open for a conversation, or like, hey, maybe I'm not, I think is a really good idea too. Because you know, sometimes like you have people who, I think a lot of people in society do this where they kind of put their heads down and put their, you know, AirPods in or something like that. And it's, you know, the average person, when you walk by someone who's wearing sunglasses, has the AirPods in, you know, face down in their phone, it's kind of hard to, you know, gauge that and be like, do they really want to talk to anybody? Should I approach them or not? Yeah. Like they kind of like make themselves closed off. But I feel like a lot of the time, like these people are maybe the ones who want to be talked to the most, who want to engage the most. But they're kind of, like you said, like maybe they're like shy, or maybe they're afraid of like opening themselves up to that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the signs are such a great idea because I mean, truthfully, for me, sometimes I am that person. I'll go to like Summer Moon. I just have my AirPods in and I'm just doing work. And I mean, if someone were to talk to me, I'm not gonna. I mean, I would enjoy that, but I know that I'm going there just to get work done. But the signs just open the floor, so it's like you walk in and you see visibly, okay, this person's wanting to work, this person's down to talk or whatever. It just makes it easy. It breaks that barrier automatically when you walk in. So, yeah, that would be a really nice feature to have.
Well, dude, take us back to, like, you grew up, you told us a little bit about your story, but there's other people that are going to be listening, you know, hearing you for the first time. So, like, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? And how did you end up here?
Yeah, so I was born in Boca Raton, Florida, so about 30 minutes north of Miami. And I only spent like the first year of my life there, so I really remember nothing.
Really?
But yeah, so
Did you tell me that? Did you tell us that last time?
maybe I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Damn,
But yeah, so I was born in Florida. I'm a Florida baby, but I grew up in Georgia like my entire life. I tell people I'm from Georgia, like the suburbs of Atlanta, like 45 minutes north. Pretty like standard childhood, I would say. Like, you know, um, went to like a normal high school, like played sports growing up. Um, yeah, I think maybe a little unique in the fact of like my like heritage and lineage. Because like you look at me, you talk to me, you see my name, like it's very like, you know, average American guy, right? At least I feel like that's the impression that I give off. But then when I start to like tell people about like who I am like culturally and stuff, they're like, whoa, dude, like this can't like it doesn't compute,
Yeah.
dude. Like there's too much going on. So
Your name threw me off so hard. Kevin Brown. I was like, because it was after I had talked to you, I asked your name.
yeah.
It was after I already got your background. That is only then did we know your name. So that was like even worse. You're like, whoa, what?
Yeah, I kind of call it like my CIA special agent trick to like start speaking Spanish with people because they're like, what is going on here,
That's
dude?
so
Like,
dope.
like I've used to do this trick like in high school where like I'd pretend to hit my head like really hard on like one of those metal poles you'd have in like high schools.
Yeah.
And I just like only speak in Spanish and for people I didn't know. And they're like, yo, what's
is
going
amazing.
on?
Oh
What's
my
going on? But yeah, that's kind of like the cultural parts. Like my mom's from Colombia, my dad's from Uruguay, so both South Americans. So my first language was Spanish. So when I went to like preschool and kindergarten, like I didn't speak a lick of English. Like, yeah. So like they thought I was kind of stupid. They were like, "Who's you're like 4 or 5 years old interacting with other 4 to 5 year olds, like, and you don't speak their language, like." It's got to be kind of weird, right,
Yeah.
for the other kids too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I learned how to speak English. So like it wasn't even my first language. And yeah, that's I don't know
That
where
is
else
so interesting.
where else to go with this, but that's kind
So
of
you were in Georgia. You said you
yeah.
you grew up in Georgia through high school too?
Yeah.
Public high school?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, public high school, really big high school.
Okay.
Probably like 4,000 students total. My graduating class was like 800 kids. So yeah,
crazy.
massive high school in North Georgia. Yeah, pretty standard high school experience.
So I'm curious, like, by what age were you able to fluently speak English?
I think I was like 7 or 8
Okay.
by the time I was like fully ingrained. Because like around that time I was like, so I guess this is like another part of like my childhood was like, so I skipped a grade. I skipped the first grade. And I really don't remember all the details about this. Like my mom has told me this in passing, but like, basically like I was going through kindergarten and like I was in the Horizons class, which is like man, I hate this term, but like they called it like the gifted
Yeah.
students,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
like, man, it puts you on a pedestal for no
Yeah, for
reason
sure.
at all. Like, I don't know what put me in that class, but so they put me in this like Horizons class and apparently like I was like really good at like multiplication tables and like I was just really ahead of like the kindergarten like curriculum. So they end up like taking me to the principal's office and I thought I was in trouble. And they make me take this like test in front of the principal. And like all I remember was that when we walked out, I walked out with my mom. I remember I had a Godzilla book like that I took from the library. I was like reading it and she's like, "All right, Kevin, you don't have to do the first grade now." I was like, "What? Like how does that make any sense?"
That's crazy.
So then like next school year, instead of going to first grade, I went to second grade straight from kindergarten. And I always think that's like a little fun fact that I never did the first grade.
Do you remember how it felt going, like leaving? Did you make? I'm sure you made friends. So you had to jump a grade and then make all new friends, meet all new people, right?
Yeah. But I think that's pretty easy as a kid. Like you can just go on the playground and be like, hey, like let's play soccer together, and like you're automatically best friends.
Yeah,
So
that's true. That's
yeah.
true.
Hmm.
I feel like that definitely would have been harder if you were in high school, maybe. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
How was it with all of those students in your grade? Did you feel like you preferred a bigger class, or would you have liked to have a smaller class?
I definitely felt inferior like the first few weeks because like when you're a kid, like 1 year makes a huge difference.
Mhm.
And like, man, like I just remember I was like thinking all these 8-year-olds are so much smarter than me. They know division already. I didn't know how to divide. I remember that was like a big thing. I was like, I don't know how to divide yet. These kids
Yeah.
do. And like, it was
And
kind of,
and you're learning English, like pretty much, right?
yeah, I was still like,
That's crazy,
still
dude.
picking up English too. So, it was a little intimidating, man. But I had one of the coolest teachers of all time, Mr. Z. I still remember his name. This guy was like the coolest teacher ever, man. Like he was just so funny and like engaging with all the kids. And like, man, I just remembered like that was one of the times where like I really looked forward to school every day just to hang out with him. And he used to
Wow.
like let us like mess with his hair. Like if we all did really well on a test, he'd do a pizza party.
Mm,
Yeah,
Dang.
yeah,
that's dope.
We need more teachers like that.
for real,
Seriously.
for real.
I had an art teacher in high school that was hands down my favorite teacher because he was just down to earth, engaging, all the things you just mentioned. He was an art teacher, and his classroom was kind of like a little bit of a safe haven. You could kind of just come and chill, be creative, and then go back into the grind for sure. So those teachers make a big difference. So like going into high school, what was that like for you? Were you okay with it, or did you like have like identity stuff going on, or like what?
Yeah, man, I was a really awkward kid in high school. Like I had glasses, like I was really skinny too. Like I'm also like pretty short. I'm like 5'6", I think, which like nowadays like I'm fine with. I'm like pretty like confident in myself, but
Yeah.
like when I was like not I wasn't even 5'6" back then, man, I got made fun of so much for being short, for being like, also got made fun of for being Jewish as well. And so like that was a big thing that like, I was just not confident at all, like going into high school.
Mm.
So it was like, and honestly, I didn't even gain that till after high school. So it was really rough for me because like I didn't have that many friends, and the friends I did were like not like really like close. So yeah, high school was rough for me, man, for real. Yeah,
Well, what kind of sports did you say you played?
soccer.
Soccer.
Yeah,
Nice. Did you play that all throughout high school?
yeah.
Nice.
So what was it that, like, when do you think you made that shift of like when did you feel like you became confident? Because you seem like a very confident person now talking to you, especially when we mentioned at the library, like this dude just randomly talks, like, opens up a conversation. So like, when do you think that shift happened?
First of all, thank you. Like that's like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really means a lot to me because I did work on it a lot. Like the confidence thing. But I think it started like towards the end of senior year. I had a crush on this girl named Taylor. And it's funny because, well, side note, like my friends always made fun of me because I only crushed on girls named Taylor. It was like
Dude, I crushed on girls named Taylor too. Taylor too.
let's go.
My wife's name is Taylor.
No way,
Yeah,
really?
I'm married. Yeah.
What a coincidence. So yeah, no, and I mean, so I had Taylor 1, Taylor 2, Taylor 3. Like I'm not kidding. It was like it was a pattern. It was a pattern. And so
That's amazing.
Yeah, so finally Taylor 3 comes along, and the trilogy right there. And
Third time's the charm.
and I talked to her for a little bit, and she tells me she goes to this gym. What was it called? It was called, I don't think it was Lifetime Fit. We'll just call it Lifetime Fitness for now. But she used to go to this gym, so I was like, man, I should start going to the gym so I can talk to her. And man, it sounds so stupid, like in retrospect, but it's what got me going to the gym and like working out, and like I would go like after school every day just to like talk to her and like run on the treadmill next to her, and then like that's how I started to work out. And then I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, dang, like these muscles look good. Like I look good. I'm not
Dude.
skinny anymore. And I started to eat like 2 Chipotle burritos a day. So I started to gain like mass, and I'm not this like skinny, wimpy kid anymore. And so that was like when it kind of started. I'm like, I can defend myself. Like I can be like a confident person and not like just fall back and be the glasses kid and be the, the wimp that I used to think I was. Yeah.
Gosh, dude. That's the beauty of exercise. It's just,
I know.
it's the best confidence booster.
I can see, yeah, you got the.
You
No, you don't work out, actually. You don't work out?
No, I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was gonna say. I thought you were saying you didn't, because like I can tell. Yeah.
Well, dude, you were like 185 coming into college, right?
Yeah.
And now you're like 200, 205, something like that.
Yeah, I didn't really start working out until football, like in high school. Because my school didn't. I went to a very small school. Me and Joseph both did, and our school like started a new football program 10th grade, and so that was when they brought in the whole like weight training program and everything. So that was like the beginning of my weight training, I guess. But then when I went to college and played football there, I went into college at 185. And they eventually I became a defensive end. And so they're like, dude, like we just need you to put on weight, man. So my coach, I remember sitting in the office with my coach who was like, I literally want you to eat whatever you want. And like just eat constantly. He was like pizza, donuts, whatever, which probably isn't like very good.
That's the
like
dirty
the
bulk,
dirtiest
man.
bulk, whatever. But yeah, by I think a year later I was like 220. So and I was pushing like 225. So I was eating like 4,000 calories a day, just every day, always. Yeah.
I mean, you were probably there with the double Chipotle burrito.
Oh,
I mean, yeah,
close.
dude.
Yeah. To 4.
Yeah.
We have a buddy who Zach was roommates with. Or actually, both and I were roommates. Both him and I were roommates with at different times.
Yeah.
Who at one time was eating 3 Chipotle burritos in one sitting.
Dude.
He's a big dude.
He's a big dude. Like
O-line
defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's some like JJ Watt level of eating.
It's the point where like it's actually really entertaining to go eat with him because you're just like amazed. You're physically amazed at the ability. You're just like
He just puts it away.
yeah. You look away. You look back and he's just finishing up one burrito and you're like, dude, I just unwrapped mine. Where did it go?
Yeah.
I think it's so crazy too to like hang out with people or go to eat with people that eat like either super quickly or super slowly too. And you're like, dude, what the? Like, how'd you do that? Like, I just started. I have friends like that. They just like don't even like breathe. It's before they finish their food.
I can usually eat pretty quickly.
Cool.
You miss playing? You miss playing football? What was it like playing football?
I do miss football a lot. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not like I wouldn't say I'm a violent person, but there's just something about being able to like run full speed into somebody, you know? And like, it's just fun. I remember the first football game I played, because I grew up in sports like all my life, basketball, soccer, baseball, whatever. And then when I played football for the first time, like that first game, I remember running back to the sideline after like, the first like drive. I was like, dude, this is the most fun I've ever had in any sport. Like, it's just so much fun. I don't know. But I do miss that. I miss that like full contact sport. And football, that's like the only sport really where when you're done, like you're done. And you can go join like some random league or whatever. Yeah. But it's just not the same. So
yeah, I feel like the competitiveness and like the camaraderie of like being in a locker room playing football is just like on. Like I never played, but I wish I played because it feels like when you're in there, like man, y'all are just like arm in arm, like going into battle together. Like it's the closest thing to war you can do with like your friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially in like high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, yeah, when you're out there every single day, just freaking hitting each other over and over and over again, like. I mean, you've become like brothers, kind of. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it's true. So
going back to the confidence thing, when you started to gain confidence, I always had this question: what do you think is the difference between confidence versus arrogance? I know it's kind of a big question, but like for me, I've seen people that other people will consider arrogant, But then I got to know that person, and I'm like, actually, this dude's not very arrogant. He's just really confident, and to the point where he just doesn't care that much how he comes across. But like for me, I'm someone who I'm a little bit more internally confident, where I don't really exude it very much. Like it's more of a quiet confidence. But there's other people that'll walk around, they have kind of a swagger, and people will be like, oh, that dude's arrogant. But when you get to really know them, they're not. But then some guys, they are super arrogant too. So it's like, where's the line, do you think?
Man, that's a great question. And I will say, like, I can tell from speaking to you as well, like that was one thing I picked up on as well. You do have that like confidence to you when you speak, right? Like you have a very strong set of beliefs. And I think that's kind of like where the confidence from is, like not just belief in what you believe in, but believing in yourself as well. And like I can definitely pick up on that just from talking to the both of y'all and from that first conversation at the library too.
Cool.
But man, it's a tough one because I still deal with this day in, day out at my job too. You know, sometimes like it's hard to not come across as arrogant, and it's hard to to control you can't control how people perceive you, right? And I think there's very easy ways to pick up on arrogance. Like if someone's like telling you, hey, this is how you should do this, or hey, this, I'm better than you. Obviously very arrogant person. But I think sometimes maybe when you feel like something is really powerful and you really believe in something, and so maybe someone doesn't agree with you, that might also come across as like, oh, this guy's better than me. Who does he think he is? This arrogant, person. So, I mean, it's a tough question to answer, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Zach?
I was always thinking, I mean, I feel like I'm always just afraid of becoming prideful, I guess. Like I try really hard to walk in humility, but then I feel like, there's so many times in church where the pastor will be like, you raise your hand if you think you're humble. And like, they like get you with that gotcha question. And like, oh, if you raise your hand, then you're not that humble or whatever. So I've always hated that, but I don't know. It's hard to, I just feel like pride is such a deep rooted human thing, even in just such like small things. And so humility is just a hard thing to constantly walk in, to constantly have that mindset. It's hard to have confidence in humility instead of prideful confidence. And that's the difference.
True.
But yeah.
So you go throughout high school, and it's about senior year, you start to get this confidence. Did you ever end up like dating this girl or anything? No. Okay. But I mean, she got you into the gym, so that's clearly been a huge part of your life.
Yeah.
So then you graduate, and then where do you go from there?
I ended up going off to college at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. And man, I feel like that was really where I like started to blossom into the person that I am today. Like staying true to the theme of like confidence and like growing into yourself. It was kind of the first time that like I walked into a really fresh set of people and experiences, and I was accepted for like who I was and like what I brought to the table, which was something that I never got in high school. I remember like this sinking feeling when my parents like dropped me off, like they helped me move in, and then they're like, all right, we're going back home. And then, the first 30 minutes you're sitting there like, what is about to happen to me? Like I'm really on my own for the first time in my life. And that's a crazy feeling at 17 years old. Like, man, what is going to go on from here? Yeah. And then, I just like became really tight with these guys, like on my dorm floor, 6th floor C wing. So we called ourselves 6C. I'm probably gonna send this clip to them. So like, shout out to 6C.
Yeah, dude.
But yeah, man, we were just like 30, 40 just stupid guys playing stupid games in the dorm. Like we had this one where like you would just throw a tennis ball like back and forth like in this really tight hallway, and like someone would get hit every time. There was no way to win the game. There's no way to lose the game. You either got hit or you didn't. So yeah, that's kind of how my freshman year went. Was
wow.
yeah.
Dang, that's awesome.
We can relate.
Yeah, we can
Yeah, I
relate
remember
to that.
y'all were telling me about y'all were pretty tight on your freshman floor too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's why it's called second floor experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it, dude. Yeah, I 100% relate to your experience. I had the same exact experience going to college, and thankfully I ended up on second floor, which is like very similar to what you just described for you guys, and we were just hit it off.
Want me to get that?
Sure.
Ring, ring. I'm gonna keep it going. Yeah, keep it going. What's up?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
We were just talking about our church, and we just wanted to.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
What's your name, man? I'm Jody.
Jody. Jody?
All right, nice to meet you, Zach.
Nice to meet you. We're actually filming a podcast. Want to come say hi? No, I'm just kidding. It's called the Second Floor Experience, and it's just about meeting young people and hearing their stories, pretty much. So, oh yeah?
Come tell it.
Yeah, come tell us sometime. No, it's got to be on camera, dude.
We're good. Hey, pleasure to meet you, Zach.
Yeah, you as well. You as
Thank you,
well.
sir.
I like that shirt, man.
Oh, man, it's
Yeah.
all about Jesus.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Amen,
Amen, man. Amen.
That's what it's about.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Zach.
All right, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. You as well.
Well, that was unexpected, but welcomed.
Do you thirst for a drink from the well?
Jesus is calling.
Always.
Always that living water.
Here's a question for y'all.
That living water.
What is that denomination, or what is that church?
Let's find out.
Coming back.
Says okay.
Church of the Living Water of Austin.
We can ask them. They're still out there. They seem. I would guess. If I had to guess, it'd probably be. I don't know. I'm gonna guess either Baptist, Pentecostal, or non-denominational.
Let me see. Oh,
Seems like a pretty typical.
yeah.
I don't know.
Let's scan this QR code.
That was awesome.
Water, Austin. See, most podcasts, they don't like that. They don't like that kind of stuff. We welcome it. I would have had them sit down and tell their
Talk to us.
Go grab a seat.
Very cool. Very cool. Our services. Family life class. Sunday morning and Sunday evening services. That's kind of rare now.
Oh yeah.
A lot of churches have moved away from that.
Interesting.
Looks like a Baptist church.
You think so? Cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Good for them doing door-to-door stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, for real.
A lot of people don't.
They had a whole crew out there. Did you see everybody?
I saw
Dude.
no, I only saw 2 or 3.
Dude, there was probably 6 people. Yeah.
Dang.
So why do you ask?
Well, my next question was going to be, well, it sounds like you guys do support it. You guys enjoy when people come and they spread Christianity or their churches, even if it's not the same denomination as you.
Yeah. Are you asking why do we or why?
Yeah,
are we
yeah.
doing that?
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that first of all, I will say I think a disadvantage of Protestantism, where Martin Luther came and he divided from the Catholic Church. I think a disadvantage to that is you have all these disagreements, and the disagreements produce a bunch of different denominations, and they're usually quibbles over things that we wouldn't consider super major. Should you baptize someone fully into water, or should you just sprinkle on them? It's these matters of religion that after going to Bible college, we realize is not always that big of a deal. There are some things that are very, very clear, and that we would say, hey, there's a pretty clear position on this. There's a lot of stuff that's just up for interpretation. And I think the division is more costly than the little nuances themselves.
Yeah.
And so
some of our professors in college described it as there's closed hand theology, which is the stuff that you kind of can't do away with, that kind of everyone should, that we expect all denominations, whether like Baptist or, you know, Pentecostal or whatever, the closed hand theology is like, you know, Jesus died for our sins, raised from the dead, and like those like big core beliefs of the faith. And then open hand is stuff like speaking in tongues, or I don't know,
like the baptism thing I just said.
yeah,
Or
where it's
you know,
not
should you meet on Sunday night and Sunday morning? Is that a requirement? Should you Sabbath on Saturday or Sunday? Like those types of things are, I think, push people away and divide us more than they bring us together. And that's why I say, like, I think Catholics, an advantage of Catholicism is the unity. There's typically a lot more unity inside the Catholic Church because they don't allow that difference. So I always like to point that out, because even though we are like technically Protestants, people focus on the differences way more than they focus on the unity, which I think is just not a good thing.
Well, I feel like that's not just religion. That's everything now.
That's true.
So
Yeah, that's true.
But would you say, are there denominations like that within
Judaism?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Not as many as like the ones that y'all named, like and again, forgive me if I, you know, don't remember all of them.
No, yeah,
like Protestant, baptism is the act Baptist. Catholic, like these are all like I have yet to dive deeper into each one of these and the differences, which is why I think it's so interesting to speak with y'all, because it's again something that I grew up knowing nothing about.
Yeah, same for us about
yeah.
yeah.
So with Judaism, like there is some, but there's a lot less, and it's definitely less prominent in the U.S. For example, did y'all? I don't know if y'all heard, but there was this big story about like Jews digging tunnels in New York.
Yes, I was really hoping you were going to tell that story.
Oh my god!
So did we talk about this at the library?
You did, but I want people to hear.
Yeah. So basically, for all the people that don't know out there, there's a few months ago there was a story about these Jews that were digging tunnels underneath the Chabad in Brooklyn. And what Chabad is kind of I guess one of the biggest branches, or we'll call it one of the biggest branches of Judaism. Sometimes it's also can get very divided within that branch. I think Catholicism might be the same way, where there is differences in how orthodox they are and how serious they are. For example, I consider myself like not that religious. However, at this headquarters, there's a division called Hasidic Jews, and they're the ones that, you know, you'll see with like the big hats. They're always wearing like all black with like white button downs. The women dress very conservatively, and they're kind of the ones that are the most orthodox out of all the Jews. And so the story was that they all follow this one rabbi who's now dead. He died, I think, in the 90s, and he was very passionate about expanding the Chabad. It's the headquarters, the international headquarters in Brooklyn. So there was a few people who said, hey, like, we got to stay true to what this guy was saying, and we got to expand this thing. And I think there were some issues with the building next door. There wasn't, you know, real estate in New York is not cheap. So they start digging tunnels underneath to expand downwards instead of, you know, laterally or vertically. And so it just comes up with this, you know, crazy Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle story of like people digging tunnels. But that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to stay true to the rabbi's word of expanding and you know, making more space for them to pray and study. So
they took that literally.
Yeah, literally. Like if it means if we can't buy the building, we'll go dig underneath. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, so that's a really good example of like, you know, I would never do something like that, but they are so deeply passionate about it that they'll do it.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that is such a crazy. I remember seeing so many conspiracy like stories about that stuff, dude. Gosh.
Okay, so you were in college, you met all these guys, and I remember you telling us at the library that you had not really been super into your faith or the community aspect of your faith even until you met these guys. And then you met sort of like some more, what's the words? Like you met some more leaders in the Jewish faith that would bring you guys in. Can you like tell us about that?
Yeah, so the freshman year guys, they're another group of guys. This was just, you know, my stupid ball throwing friends.
Okay.
And so like the second year, I joined a Jewish fraternity, And it was really
right,
it was really funny because also with the way that Greek life worked, like there was two Jewish frats and one Jewish sorority, so there was like a lot of competition between the two fraternities in what's called the rush process, where you basically invite a bunch of Jewish kids from Atlanta, because most of the kids were from Atlanta, and get them super drunk on a weekend and say like, hey, join our frat. Like that's basically how you joined, was you would come up for a weekend, you would get absolutely blackout drunk, and then they would make you sign a bid when you were super drunk, and then you'd wake up and you'd be like, oh, I guess I'm joining this frat. And there was a lot of like,
What?
yeah. Do you want me to go further down that, or you want me to keep going with the Jewish organization thing? Because I can go either way.
Dude.
I want to hear more about the frat first.
Okay.
Yeah, we can circle back.
Yeah. So, so basically, the rush process is one of the most interesting things, I think, because there's a lot of like passion between the two groups, and they really want to beat each other. It was my first introduction to like social competition, right? So we would text kids like, hey, what's up, Kevin? Like, do you want to come up this weekend for Rush? And it was like, as a kid going up there, I went in as a second year, so I already knew what college was. But for a lot of these kids coming up from high school, it was this crazy weekend that they thought was so naturally like, oh, it just happened. Like I just got super drunk and then I joined a frat and blah, blah, blah. But it's so funny looking at it, like when you pull back the curtains of what the frat is doing, it's so organized. Like it's so set up so that kid like does get super drunk and like does sign the bid and does join the frat. So like I, for example, like the summer that we were rushing kids and we would have them up like over the summer, every night was like a whole organization of like, we would have to, have the beer pong table in this, side. We need to have at least 10 girls standing over here. We need to go buy beer for this event. And we need to get this kid especially drunk because if he's on the fence, he doesn't know if he wants to join this frat or this frat. So like, it was this whole thing of, whole pre-organized thing. Wow. And so eventually like, the summer goes on and you start to dwindle down, and eventually it's usually about 25 and 25 kids because there's not that many Jews going to this school, joining each one of the frats. And throughout the year and everything, you also have we would have charity basketball games. We would, prank each other. We would steal their basketballs and put crickets in their house and or buy 10,000 ladybugs on Amazon and throw it through a window, and then some kid's room is just filled with ladybugs. It was so stupid, but that was the rush process and joining a frat was really and seeing it from behind the curtains was even crazier too, to see
I bet, dude.
I did not know there were ladybugs on order at Amazon. That's crazy.
Hey, add it to your wish list.
The more we know. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so then were we gonna go after that?
The Jewish community part?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I joined one of the Jewish frats, and these guys, they start saying hey, there's this house on campus, a Chabad house. So it's under that same branch that I was talking about, okay. But they're less religious and they're more focused on the community side of things with Judaism. So the way that they bring kids in is not hey, let's pray. It's hey, we'll give you food and we'll get you drunk, but we'll also do prayers beforehand. Mm-hmm. So they would host these Sabbath dinners. We called them Shabbat. And you would go and they would serve you this really nice green sauce that the wife of the rabbi made, and some challah bread, which if you haven't had challah bread, it's amazing. And then the rabbi would come around and get you drunk. They call them l'chaims. It literally translates from Hebrew to life, but it's the equivalent of saying cheers. So he'd be hey, let's do a l'chaim. And he would bring around a bottle of whiskey and just get all these kids super drunk. Okay. So, and he's getting super drunk too. He's drinking with everybody. And it's that's how he would build the community, is I think what's interesting is how real he was about it, right? He knows these kids that are 18 to 22 don't want to be praying. They just want to party. They just want to get drunk. So he's hey, I'm going to be a good salesman here. Just do what they want to do, and then tie it all back to Judaism. And then he'd be hey, by the way, I know you're going to be super hungover tomorrow, but we have services, if you want to come. And at that point, you would be okay, I'll go, I should be doing this. And you start to realize hey, I should be a little bit more religious. I should be wrapping. Do you know what wrapping tefillin is? Mm-mm. Okay. So it's it's this black, I don't know what substance it's made out of, but it's this thing that you wrap around your arm, and then you put this like little box on your head, and I think it has scripture inside the box, and you say like a prayer. So like that's also what we call a mitzvah, like a very good thing to do in Judaism. And he would be like, hey, come wrap tefillin, and like say, and you know, come to the services and everything. So that was like another big thing that like he did.
Yeah. Didn't that tradition of the scripture on the box come from that? They take that verse literally, where it talks about like tie the scriptures around your heart, or have them on your heart, and tie them around your head like a garland or something like that.
I remember hearing something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a verse like that, and I remember someone telling me that the conservative Jews will take that the traditional Jews will take that very seriously, and literally have little tiny scrolls of scripture wrapped up inside a little box strapped to their head. And so that's what that was. Wow, I've never heard of that like in the wild, I guess.
Do y'all do anything similar like that too?
I mean, I think the closest thing to ours would just be like wearing scripture on t-shirts maybe, but it doesn't have like a direct religious
I mean, we do like communion as like a sacrament, I guess, kind of in that way, right? Would you say it's like a kind of like a tradition?
Yeah.
Can you actually tell me what communion is? Because I know it's the equivalent of like our bar mitzvah, but I really don't know what y'all actually do during communion.
All it is basically is it comes from when Jesus sat down with the disciples, and it's like right before
the Last Supper.
Yeah, the Last Supper, right before he's gonna go and be crucified. And so he sits down with them. He breaks bread and passes it around. He's like, he says, "This is my body. You're to do this in remembrance of me." And then like he gives them the wine. It's like his blood or whatever. So he says to do this in remembrance of me. So for, I guess, all like since then, believers every now and then they gather and then they have communion where it's like the same thing. Like the pastor will go up, he'll pass bread around. Like sometimes they use crackers, and then we all take and like they'll do like a prayer, and then he'll pass the wine around. Or like usually it's grape juice for some places, but like Catholic churches will actually use wine.
Another area that's different.
Yeah. It can be very different. Like a lot of some denominations, I don't know if Catholics believe this, but it's transubstantiation. They do, right? Where they actually believe that the bread, like when it's consumed, it turns into the flesh of Christ, and as well as the blood. So, but for us, for most like Pentecostal or like Protestant churches, it's literally just this like symbolism. So
it's meant to be a reminder.
Yeah, it's meant to be a reminder of the crucifixion, basically, and what that means for believers. So,
and you have to prepare for this. Like this is like
it's more of a heart preparation. So like the pastor would be like, if you're not at a place spiritually, there's some churches that will ask you not to take communion if you're not saved.
Yeah.
And what does being saved mean?
So being saved would be basically confessing with your mouth and believing in your heart that Jesus is Lord and Savior. Like not just a good teacher, not just what other people consider him, but that he really did live, that he really did die, and that he really did rise from the dead. And not just that, but that action really and truly, now they call it like a propitiation, which is a big word for saying he stepped in our place. And so sin, basically, we believe in the Christian faith, separates us from God. And that started in the Garden of Eden. And now we are born with that sin. And so that's part of the fallen human nature. And what Christ came to do was to fill that. And so the language that's used is like Jesus, because he lived a sinless life, when he died, it was the ultimate sacrifice to God, covering our debt of sin for everyone. All sin, past, present, future. And now we walk around, when you become saved and you accept Jesus into your life, you are now basically covered almost like a cloak in Jesus' righteousness. So that when God sees you, he doesn't see you for your sin, even though he knows you're a sinner. He sees you as his son's righteousness. And so that's how people can get into heaven, is God is so holy and so just that he can only, like, if you don't want to be with God, he's not going to force you to be. But we can't, on our own strength, be holy enough to be with God through our own righteous acts. So the point of being saved is understanding I'm not righteous enough. I do need a savior. And Jesus provides that covering of righteousness.
Yeah.
It goes way deeper than that.
Yeah.
There's a lot more like nuance and stuff, but it can be both very simple and very complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
Like everything.
Yeah.
And
the whole, like, the point of Jesus dying was because beforehand, like throughout the whole Old Testament, they would sacrifice animals that was like the blood that would take their place, because sin is death. Like the result of sin is death. And so they would have to literally take a life to cover their sin, I guess, to what's the word I'm looking for? Cleanse themselves of the sin, I guess. And so Jesus, when he came down, he was the ultimate perfect sacrifice for everybody.
He's called like the spotless lamb. There's a lot of that kind of language used because we believe that through the Bible that he was fully man and fully God. And so because of that, he was obedient to the point of death, meaning that when he was on the cross dying, he could have had angels come down and commanded to get off the cross. Like, he didn't have to do that. But because he humbled himself in that way, that's why Zach was talking about humility. Zach takes humility very seriously because he's a Christian. Why? Because Jesus showed the ultimate act of humility, of dying for people that he knew would never accept him, that he knew would spit in his face. Like, whenever I sin and I mess up, I'm basically spitting in God's face. And so Jesus became that ultimate sacrifice because he lived a sinless life and did not have to die. He was guiltless, but chose to die as that self-sacrifice. The best analogy I've ever heard is, like, imagine you were on death row. Let's say you like murdered your friend or something. You're on death row. You're in court, and the judge is like sentencing you. Like, Kevin, you're gonna get the death penalty. And then all of a sudden, like, Jesus bursts in the room, and he's like, "No, actually, I'm gonna take that." And so now he stands in your place. So you get to walk free, and he's done that. So the same concept as sin. Sin would be like what you've done, and then Jesus is standing in your way. His righteousness is now covering you.
Yeah.
As that's what happens when you truly believe in your heart, confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord. But it's not just that. It's living it out. And again, that's where some denominations will, there's a lot of arguments there and different things. But I say that's a pretty decent synopsis.
Yeah, for sure.
But what's a bar mitzvah? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so when you turn 12, they start to prepare you to become a man at 13. Judaism believes that when you turn 13, you're now fully a man. And the way you do that is you have to learn a passage of the Torah, and you have to, like, pray, and you have to say it in front of your entire community on a Saturday morning at services. So it's like a really big deal in Judaism, because you also have not just the the man part, but also the part of the big party and the big celebration that you are finally becoming a man. So it's a pretty interesting process. I spent a whole year with my rabbi every week learning this portion of the Torah.
Really?
And it's so difficult, because that was my first exposure to Hebrew. And it's like a song too. So imagine you have to learn like a really long song, and it's not even in English, right? Like, that's how it felt. And I was 12. So like, that doesn't help either. So basically, like, I would have to like go home and like listen to this and learn this. And eventually I did give like, I did the services, and I read this like Torah portion, and I had this like, this like massive party with like my whole family was there. All my friends and family. I know this sounds shallow, but like the best part was like all the money that I got that day. I was 13, and like all my like extended aunts and uncles and cousins would come up to me and just like hand me checks like all night, and like gift cards and stuff. Like, when you're 13,
dude,
like, all you really want is like a new TV or like a new like mini fridge or something like that, like something like so sick that like it's just going to be so cool. At the time I was really into airsoft, so I wanted to get like an airsoft gun.
Oh yeah.
Man, so like that was actually what I blew all my money on, was like a really cool airsoft gun, believe it or not.
Just like spent $2,000 on a freaking like airsoft gun.
Yeah,
that's
dude,
amazing.
it was awesome, dude. And I remember like, all right, I'm getting off topic here, but then I would go to like the airsoft arena that like was down, like my parents would drive me. And that's how I would spend like my Fridays and Saturdays, was playing airsoft against these other like kids. And like I showed up, I remember feeling like such a badass. The first time I showed up with it was called a Polar Star, and the way it worked was like you would connect like an air tank to it, and so like you had to wear this like high pressure scuba tank on your back and connect it to your gun, and then because of that, like you were able to like shoot so much faster. Like you would barely tap the trigger and it would shoot like 10 BBs at once or something, and the pressure was even higher. Like you could crank up the FPS, the feet per second of the BBs, to be like 600 instead of like the typical like 300 to 400.
Yeah.
So then you would hit someone, and they would just be like, "Oh, like man down."
Bro.
Yeah. So that was also really sick too. Like I used to like dress up with like all this military gear, and like all the kids would see me like plugging in the Polar Star, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, like I'm screwed. I'm losing this game." So yeah, that was also
amazing.
That was really fun too.
That's amazing. Wow.
But yeah, that was kind of what I remember from my bar mitzvah. It was getting the airsoft gun. But yeah.
I think I really wish that our culture, just as Americans, would have a better initiation, for lack of a better word, for men specifically to go from boyhood to manhood. There's just not a time where you can really feel that I've felt so far, that you are like, okay, I'm a man now. Everyone accepts me as a man. I got to start acting like a man. And some people will argue now, it's like, well, you got to act like one first. But it's this cycle where if you have people in your life that expect you to be a certain way, I'm sure your community now saw you be like, hey, you just had your bar mitzvah. Like your mom, maybe your dad were like, you need to shape up, or you need to act a certain way now. There's no social pressure necessarily to do that. And there's these weird laws we have where it's like, okay, 18 you can vote, 21 you can drink, 25 you can like rent a car finally, and you can't be on your parents' insurance anymore. It's like, okay, you get married, maybe you buy a house, you have kids. Like there's certain milestones, but I've talked to a lot of people and they never really feel like there's a point where it's like, okay, I'm really a man now, or I'm really a woman now. Like, I don't know. I wish we had something like that.
Do you feel like a man right now? Do you feel
sometimes? For the most part, like getting married, taking on all my own bills and getting married was a big point where I felt like I was more accepted as a man, and having a, like, for lack of a better word, like a real world job outside of college. You just are, you get a little bit more percentage points of acceptance, but it's like, but you don't have kids and you don't own a house. And it's almost like the layers of responsibility are the more accepted you are by older men. And so if I like, oh, you have a mortgage now? Oh, now you're more of a man because you're more responsible. It's like, oh, you have kids now? Oh, you're more of a man because you're more responsible. But like in the Native American culture, they would send a young boy out with like a freaking knife and be like, okay, survive for 3 days, kill something, bring it back, and then you'll be accepted as a man. You can go on the hunts with the men. And I think that's a much healthier way, in all my wisdom of psychology, of the degree I don't have. I think that's a better way for us to do it. I don't know.
No, I agree. I mean, it's like, I don't think there is a very, like, at least in American culture, there's not like a traditional way to really signify like, hey, you're a man or you're not a man. And there's always going to be those like expectations from like other people, like, oh, you should be doing this, or you should have this, or like they compare themselves to you, like, oh, you don't have kids, I have kids that I have to take care of. Do you feel like do you feel pressure from like those, maybe the older people in your community to start to have children, to have a house? I mean, what makes you say the things you just said?
I used to feel pressured. Now I don't feel the pressure, but I know that the trigger is there. It's almost, I see it more as like a trigger. And I think that I'm okay with it. I know as a man, like I want that respect. I long for that respect to be seen as someone who is doing well by my community, by the other people that I admire. Like there's a lot of older mentors that I admire. And part of that admiration maybe is the fact that they have taken on that responsibility and done well with it. And so I think that just takes time. So I think it is a pressure for sure. I've always wanted to kind of be I've always wanted to be more mature than my age because I enjoyed those compliments. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
So when you have a son, and like later on, do you think that like will you have something like that for your son where there's like a certain thing he does and then you kind of establish that for him, like, okay, you're a man now?
I would like to. It's difficult because no one else would really uphold it though. And so I think it's much more powerful if the community around you is like, oh, you did that? Dang, like they treat you different, or they treat you they hold you to a higher standard is the best way I can put it. But like my dad did something for me where he took me on a trip when I was like 12 or 13, and we got to go out of town, do some cool stuff. Like we did like drag racing and go-karts and stuff like that. And he basically gave me the talk essentially. But it was he also tried to frame it as a thing of like, you know, you're getting older, like I guess like you're hitting puberty or whatever. Like there's a bigger expectation on you now. So he tried to do that for sure. And it was very helpful. And I really enjoyed going on that. I think we went to like medieval times.
Oh my.
Just did some fun stuff.
Someone gets like jousted and he's like, hey, you're a man now.
Did you walk through the torture chamber?
No.
Did they not have that?
I can't remember. It was a long time.
Dude. Unimaginable things, dude, went on in those times. Unimaginable.
The way they torture people?
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
It's true.
Like the fire thing, like they roast them over fire.
They would like, I mean, they would saw people in half. They would like rip their legs apart. Like,
I think
it's insane.
The guillotine is one of the craziest like execute, not to get like dark here, but like I always thought the guillotine was like so interesting, especially because like it was so prominent in like French culture up until like the late 1700s. I think the last guillotine execution was like in the like 1800s. But isn't that crazy? They just like you mess up, you commit a crime, and now you just get your head chopped off in front of public. Man, that's gotta be.
I remember, because we went on like a field trip in high school to medieval times. So walking through the torture chamber, and I was just like, dude, thank God I'm alive now and not during that time, because dude, it was wild.
It's crazy how barbaric people were just a few hundred years ago.
Yeah, just a few hundred years ago, dude.
Okay, I have a question for you. There's something you said earlier that piqued my interest. You said when that guy was going around and trying to get you guys into the community and getting you guys drunk and stuff, but having a good time and saying, hey, like in exchange, will you come on Saturday for service? You said something where you were like, I felt a bit guilty just because of the exchange, simply because he had invited us over, he'd fed us, but also that I knew that I needed to do this, or this would be a good idea. Why do you feel that way? Or why did you feel that way?
I think part of it was like, my mom went to a private Jewish school in Colombia, and she was very ingrained, or I should say Judaism and its culture was very ingrained in her. And I think one thing she tried to do for us growing up was give as much of that as possible to us, which is why I went to like Hebrew school growing up, like every Sunday morning. I think I told you this at the library too, when I like hated Sunday mornings because I used to go to this, like they would teach me like prayers and stuff at this school, and it was just like, man, why don't the other kids like have to do this? Like, why do I have to wake up on Sundays? But I think all of that started to come back to me, and I was, now that I was older and a little bit more mature, I'm like, why did she do that? Like, why was she trying to get me to like learn this and like appreciate this? And I think like seeing the rabbi, like see someone who was not my mom try to do the same thing for me was like, man, maybe I should like kind of take a second look at this. Like there's several people in my life now have been like, signaling for me to find a deeper purpose in religion than like what I initially thought about. And I think that's kind of what like sparked it, was like thinking back to like, why did my mom try to do this for me? It's like, maybe I should take it more seriously.
That's interesting.
Okay, I guess my question would be, I mean, this is totally changing topics again, but as far as like Judaism for you, I guess I don't know like all the ins and outs of Judaism. Like, what is the essence of Judaism in like how would you describe it to someone that's never heard of it? I guess.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not the best person to ask because I'm not nearly as well versed in Judaism as y'all are in your religions. I still think I'm very surface level. What I can tell you is like my experience from it and what I've seen so far is it's very community based. Well, actually, I mean, what would you like to know? Like,
I don't know, what are the core beliefs, I guess, that you would say?
that's just a tough question for me to answer because I'm not.
What's the
well,
point? What's the point of
the
Judaism?
point of Judaism?
Yeah, like
Hmm.
the guy's trying to get you to go to service. He's trying to get you involved. Why does he care?
I guess because what I know, at least what I think I know, is that you guys are waiting for the Messiah.
Right.
Still, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all I know. Really.
We're waiting for the Messiah, and like we have a lot of like holidays and stuff too that are kind of like lessons that we've like learned, and it's a lot about like being like strong-willed people. Like that's one of the big messages that like I get every time I go to like Shabbat dinners that they host at their house, right? It's like, for example, Purim is actually a holiday that's going on right now in Judaism. There's a bunch of like costume parties. If you see people dressed up for any reason right now, they're probably Jews.
Really?
Yeah, and basically the story behind Purim is that there was this king, King Hamantashen, I think was his name, and he was very he was just very harsh on the Jewish people in his kingdom way back in the day. And there was this whole, disagreement between if his daughter should marry a Jew, marry a non-Jew, and basically what happened was, she ended up marrying a Jew, and then even through all like the people in that community in that kingdom, kind of banishing the daughter and banishing that part of the family, eventually they came back and they were like really well accepted, and the king was recognized as being like just a terrible person. They started to shed light on his discrimination of like the Jews in that kingdom as well. So it ended up being like a happy story of like the daughter and then the Jew that she decided to marry. And I'm not sure where the holiday, the costume part comes from, but I think it's we come up with these weird different ways to like celebrate in Judaism, and that's like the one for Purim is like we eat these like triangle shaped snacks that are like it's like jelly in the middle. It's like a pastry with like pastry with like jelly in the middle, and then you just like dress up and celebrate. So yeah, that's one part of it.
It seems like there's a lot about remembrance and community.
Yeah.
To remember like what the Jewish people have gone through, and because that's what a lot with the Old Testament or the Torah.
Yeah.
A lot of it is remembering. Oh, we came out of Egypt. We rescued from Egypt. We rescued from this king. We rescued from Jericho. Like there's all these different commemorations, and as Christians, we share a little bit of that heritage. Because
And we come from Jews.
Well, come from Jews, and something they like the Last Supper is very similar to that because we're communion. We're remembering the Last Supper, but we're remembering something that's very symbolic to our faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I like to find things with other people that I prefer the commonalities over the differences. Versus, I think a lot of people focus on areas that were different, but I think Christians don't realize how much we have to thank Judaism for our own faith,
I mean, yeah.
So anyway, when you went to those different things, did you notice anything happen? Did anything change for you in your life? Did you feel any different? Were you just kind of like sort of going with the flow, and then just kind of you finished out your years of college? Can you kind of take us along that road?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me was like deeper friendships and connection more than anything, and also kind of a revitalized sense and purpose. Because I mean, all my friends at this time were from like the Jewish frat, and then all the the girlfriends I made were all from like the Jewish sorority as well. So it started to make me realize, like why, we're not that big of a population, right? I think we're, probably less than 1% of like the world's population, like Jews are. And so like when you start to have all these people come together and they're all like revolving around the same thing, you all grew up with the same, kind of like upbringing as well. That was really special for me because like when I was the only Jew in like North Georgia, like surrounded by people who didn't understand or like I had no sense of like identity, that was a big, like going back to what you said about like identity, that was like, oh, I'm Jewish. Like this is what it means to be Jewish. Where like I didn't have that before. And then the revitalized sense of purpose too. Like again, I don't consider myself that religious. But one of the things that I started to do after like meeting with the rabbi a couple times and him like, showing me how to wrap tefillin was there's a prayer in Judaism called the Shema. And it's basically, you say it every morning when you wake up and every night when you go to bed. And I used to say it with my mom, like also growing up too. And I never really understood like why she was like, say the Shema before you go to bed. And it was like kind of like one of those things where like brush your teeth before you go to bed. You're like a kid, like, shut up, mom. Like, I just want to play my iPad and go to sleep. But yeah, so that was like a thing that I started to do on my own was like say the Shema like in the morning and when I went to bed as well. And it's kind of like, the purpose of that prayer is to like thank God that you woke up and like, thank God again, like before you go to sleep, like praying for good sleep. So that was like another, like going back to the purpose thing, like, yeah, like I'm waking up every day. Like I have a life. Like this is bigger than just like getting drunk every weekend. This is bigger than just like being like a college kid, like going through the motions. Like there's something a little bit deeper to that. And I think that's what like after a couple of years of like going to the Shabbat dinners and like talking to the rabbi and like, occasionally going, honestly, I wasn't that good about going to services, occasionally going, that was when like the purpose started to build up. And I think that's also kind of what led to the Hebrew later on too, was like, that's really what like kickstarted everything.
I see. Wow. Okay. You said the word religious, and then when we first met, you asked me, you said like, are you religious? And I'm realizing right now that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like inside of Judaism, religious means I'm following the specific regulations or practices of my faith and going to things like service, doing the different things, the wrappings and stuff that you talked about, versus in Christianity, when people say, are you religious? It's almost like a trigger word for us because people in Christian circles, and sometimes a lot of times in the world too, will see that as, what they really mean is, are you hypocritical, self-righteous, and judgmental? And so a lot of Christians you'll find are really shying away from that word. Even Christian. There are people that are like, I don't even want to be called a Christian.
Really?
Because there is a very growing majority of people that call themselves Christians that do not actually follow the teachings of Jesus. Because they're very self-righteous, they're very judgmental, and they're very hypocritical. And we're all hypocritical in a sense because we're saying we want to be humble, but we're really prideful at times. But they are not, they don't acknowledge their own hypocrisy. And so it's a very difficult question to answer when someone asks me, are you religious? Because I don't know what they're asking. So I have to almost ask, I have to say like, well, if you mean I'm judgmental and self-righteous, I try not to be. But if you mean that I'm a follower of Jesus and I follow the Christian faith, then yes, I am. So you'll hear people say more things like, I follow the Christian faith, or I'm a follower of Jesus, or I'm a disciple of Jesus. And they'll shy away from those words because in our culture, the meanings are starting to shift. So I just thought I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, those words just get like such a bad rap.
You're good.
No. Yeah.
No, that's actually really interesting that you bring that up because like what you picked up on was right. Like when I think of religious and Judaism, it is like going to services and like rapping and I guess following like the orthodox codes of eating and whatnot. But that's actually, I mean, so what would you would call yourself a follower of Jesus more than anything?
Yeah.
How would you distinguish the different people, kind of the same levels that I'm like describing in Judaism, where it's like myself kind of very surface level versus yourself? I mean, how would you distinguish those levels of like?
I'll give you an example. So someone who we would say is like very religious would be someone who's in a church and you have someone walk in and say they're not wearing, quote unquote, wearing the right things. They don't look the right way. They don't say the right things. someone who's maybe walking off the street who's maybe wearing shorts instead of pants. There's some churches that would really frown upon you wearing blue jeans instead of wearing a suit. And they would really prefer you to speak a certain way. And if you don't, they will be very judgmental towards you. They'll almost push you out of their church. They won't consider you Christian. And so what inside of Christianity, there's a phrase that people say where they say, well, relationship over religion. And what their meaning is, you should prioritize your relationship with God over that sort of those religious acts. And it's very hard to describe this because people will hear different definitions, just like what you have when I say these different things. And so not everyone's going to understand what I'm saying. And maybe Zach, you can help clarify me a little bit. But basically, we're not following a set of rules in the same way as maybe your religion does. Ours is, we believe Jesus came to fulfill the laws, and it's now a set of behaviors, like a way you should be, not things you should do. And so,
Yeah.
Can you pick up? I feel like I'm not doing a good job of explaining
No,
this.
yeah. No, I think you got it pretty down. I mean, like, it's frustrating because I do think that, like, if I say that I'm a Christian or like I'm a disciple of Jesus or a follower of Jesus, like, it is a religion.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the difficult
it is
part.
definitionally, or is that a word?
You should
Definitively
Yeah.
a religion, for sure.
Mhm.
Like, I consider myself a disciple of Christ, so that means I do communion regularly. I worship God regularly, right? Like, I pray regularly. I do all those, like, traditions that are part of the Christian faith. But it's like the emphasis on it being more relational rather than just practice. So, like, from a lot of Protestant perspectives, I guess, a lot of times we'll look at, like, the Catholic traditions to be like, oh, like, they're just like, they're way too they're way too religious because they have all these traditions that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, from our perspective, a lot of times it just seems like they're just doing them to do them. You know, like, there's no real pursuit of relationship with Christ as like a teacher, or I guess, like, from a disciple, I don't know, standpoint. I don't know. But so that I think that's what people try to kind of, I think that's where they kind of try to make that distinction. But at the end of the day, it's still I mean, I'm religious. Like, I would say that I am religious for sure, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, it's annoying, really, that
It's
you
hard
have
to
to
nail
make
down.
those, that you have to clarify all of that. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tricky.
And the whole point is Jesus, when you accept Jesus, you're asking, like, what does it mean to be saved? When you are saved and you accept Christ into your life, there's supposed to be a transformation. Like, the way you live, the way you speak, the way you treat other people should change for the better. That's where you have the whole golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. We have things like acts of kindness to the poor, and you can go down the list of what comes from Jesus speaking in the New Testament, in the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And where we get frustrated is people who call themselves Christians, but they don't act like Christians. And what comes from that is a lot of people getting hurt. And they'll be hurt by those people, whether it's inside of a church building, a church organization, or outside. They're like, well, that person says they're a Christian, but they were extremely mean to me, or they cheated on me, or they lied and stole from me, or go down the list. And it puts a super bad taste in people's mouths of what Christianity really is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason for our angst, is that we're people who, Zach and I, are trying to pursue that internal transformation. It's a word we use in Christian faith is called sanctification, meaning the process of the inside of you changing through your relationship with Christ after you've been saved. The whole point is to become Christ-like. You're trying to be more like Jesus was. You can never be like Jesus because he was God, and we're not trying to be little gods. We're not divine in that sense, but we believe we've been created in the image of God, and because of that, we should strive to be more Christ-like, even though we know, and Jesus knows, that we'll always fail. And so that's the perspective by which we're coming at all of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get what you're coming from. There was one part that you talked about that I think is interesting and kind of ties into another topic we covered at the library, was the cheating part that you said. From what I remember, I mean, how would you define cheating? Like, what have you seen examples of this in your church? What
cheating, like in a relationship, or cheating?
Is that what you were getting at? Cheating in a relationship? Because
I was.
Okay.
I mean, but it could either way is bad.
Yeah.
So are you asking how should Christians be in terms of cheating?
I would say more, is this common at all? Does this happen? Because I'm saying, like you said, this is an example of a bad church, right? Or like a bad example of maybe
a Christian,
right?
So, well, I would say a Christian. So in a relationship, I would argue that Jesus teaches us to honor others, whether that's a friend, a spouse, a partner, doesn't matter. Like, you should honor other people the same way that you should love others the same way you're receiving love from Jesus. Like, Jesus loved you so much that he would die on a cross. Therefore, you should love others with that same kind of, it's called unconditional love. And so when you cheat on someone in terms of adultery in a marriage, or cheating on someone as a boyfriend or girlfriend, you're breaking that. You could call it like an honor code, is like not a great way to describe it, but you're breaking that. And so you're not honoring that person. You're not being kind. You're not treating them the way you would want to be treated. And so there's just as much adultery in the church as there is outside of the church. And so that's where people get that bad taste in their mouth. And that's what frustrates us, is because we are trying to be people that honor others, but a lot of people will come back at that and argue like, well, a Christian's no different than me. Why should I become a Christian? And so that's where the frustration comes. And in terms of cheating, like in general, I mean, again, you should not want to cheat someone in anything, I would say. So I feel like, am I answering your question?
No, yeah, okay. It makes sense.
Yeah, I love you're a really deep thinker, which we really appreciate. Yeah, because we're big deep thinkers too.
Yeah, no, it's fun when you like meet other people like that too. Like, you have some really like introspective conversations for sure. Well,
and I want to hear about your travels.
Yeah.
Can you explain it? Yeah, because you kind of held back a little bit last time we talked because you wanted to wait for the podcast. Yeah. So dive into that for us.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess just like blanket statement, like, man, I'd love to travel like so much. Like, I grew up like going to like Europe almost every like summer, like Thanksgiving break. Like, I've been to Germany, France, Austria, Italy, Switzerland, like name any country in Europe, like I've probably been there. And then same thing with, well, not every country in South America, but I've been to Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay. So, I think travel is like one of the things that like every single person should do. I don't care if you do it with friends, by yourself. Actually, I would encourage you to do it by yourself, because I think that, man, like that is probably one of the best like blossoming things you can do for yourself. If you ever feel like you're in a position where like, man, I really need to like switch something up in my life, or like maybe I'm not like fully, confident in myself, or, you reach those points in your life where, you're at maybe a trough and you're just like, I have no direction. I think travel is always a really great answer for this. And I know you might think like, vacation, really? You think that's like, you should be working on yourself. That is working on yourself. That is giving you, these experiences and these like stories and these, experiencing other cultures that you would never get if you just stay in one place the way you've always done it, the way you've always thought about things. So I think that's like a very important thing for anyone's personal development, personal growth, and just fun. I think it's very fun to do. Yeah. Like, but yeah, was there like a specific trip that I mentioned?
I would just to add to that, I would 100% agree. Like, I mean, I haven't been like to too many places outside of the US. But I just know that like I agree. I think like most people should just go on trips because so many of the trips that I've been on. I mean, just last year we went on like my family drove from Florida to California, and then we drove all the way back, and just that was like one of the coolest experiences ever. But there's something about trips that are so. It just like I don't know. It gives you perspective.
Takes you out of your environment.
Yeah. It's so like refreshing, and I mean that so many of like the biggest moments in my life were just from trips, and like so many just like epiphanies or just those times you get to separate yourself from the environment, like you said, and just think in a new environment. It kind of it opens your mind. Yeah. So yeah, I think I would agree. I think everyone should go on trips, like
100%.
regularly, maybe like once a year. I don't know.
As much as you can.
Yeah.
Can you describe, or do you mind telling us the story of what you shared with us at the library where you were talking about your job change and your most recent trip?
Yeah.
Because that was really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, just a little bit of background. Like I work in sales, and I had this job where I worked for a really big software company, and it was a lot of high pressure, and I frankly just was not good at this job. Like I was really good at, I nailed the interview, and the manager was like super impressed. But once like I started working the job, it was really tough because, everybody was fighting over the same accounts, and there wasn't that good of training. And, my manager said one thing but acted another way. It was a very toxic environment. And eventually, after about 9 months in that position, I got laid off, and it was like a train like hit me in the face. Like I knew I wasn't good at the job, but even when they said like, "Hey, we're gonna let you go," I was like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like it was the first time I ever got like fired. It was not even 2 years into my professional career. I started to think like, man, I should have never gotten into sales. I should have switched careers. And I really hit like this rock bottom moment where like, I call calling your parents and tell them you lost your job sucks, man. It sucks so much. Calling your friends and having to be that friend that's like, hey man, do you know anyone that's hiring? It sucks, man. Nobody wants to be in that position because you just feel so helpless. I felt like a little kid, like looking up and like.
The battery turned off?
No.
People,
Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
we have to change it every podcast. 'Cause
Okay, no worries.
I forgot about that. Yeah. It's in that.
Keep going. Okay, so.
But yeah, it sucks. Like raising up your hand to like hope like someone grabs it and like pulls you. Like it sucks asking for help. It's going back to the thing about being a man. Like you want to be independent. And so like that was really rough for me. And I spent like a whole month like just, man, my brain was everywhere. Like I started to learn how to code Python for no reason. Like I signed up for Udemy. And the worst part was like when you look at your finances and you're like, man, how long do I have to like live like before I have to ask for help?
Yeah.
Or like whatever. And so like all of this like combined like led to this like very sporadic moment where I was just like, man, like I can't keep doing this. I spent a month in my apartment just applying to jobs, studying random stuff. And out of like, I mean, you could say it was like divine intervention. I get this like Instagram ad that says flights to Colombia are $250 right now. And I don't know what sparked it in my mind. Like it was probably the dumbest thing I could have done, but I called my friend who also didn't have a job at that time, one of my good buddies from college, who I had gone on a trip with to Italy and Switzerland like about 8 months before. And I was just like, hey, Adam, like, and he's like, what? Do you want to go to Colombia in 2 weeks? And he's like, all right, let's do it. So he's on board, and I'm like, all right, we got to call our other buddy Daniel, like, because it's that's our trio.
Yeah.
And so we called Daniel. We add him to the conference call. And we're like, Daniel, what's up, man? We're going to Colombia in 2 weeks. You down? Yeah, I'm down. Of course, I'm down. So
awesome,
within 2 weeks, because he worked remote, so he could go. Within 2 weeks, I went from being like in my apartment to in Colombia. And the worst part about that was like also, my dad was really pressuring me. Like, you gotta, your job right now is to find a job. Like, you should be applying, you should be doing everything you can, learning new things. And I like broke down and called him like one day. Like I was a nervous wreck, like leading up to this call. And about 2 days before I call him, like almost crying. I'm like, Dad, I have to tell you something. And he's like, what? I'm gonna take a vacation. Like I'm going to Colombia. Man, that was like, and he thought I was gonna tell him like I did something like terrible, like committed a crime. And he's just like, man, it's your life, not mine. I don't care. Do what you want. I'm just disappointed. And then he hangs up the phone, and I'm like, woof, that was way easier than I thought it was gonna be. Like, dope. Like, I don't know what, like, you know, you feel that like immense pressure, but it wasn't. So I end up going to Colombia with my two friends. I met them in Orlando. And this whole time, like, I actually was doing pretty well for myself. Like, everything that I've set up until this point was like, felt really awful, but I had job interviews lined up. Like, I was getting responses. I had LinkedIn recruiters like reaching out to me. So I had potential to get a job. And I remember, and this is really important, I told myself, like, no matter what, like, I am going to get a job. Like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care how bad I messed up in sales. Like, I'm getting another sales job and I'm going to succeed this time. And that was like a really big, in Spanish, we call it like fuego en el estómago, which means like fire in your belly, literally.
Yeah.
But it's just like, man, like I have to do this. Like, I don't care how it works. And so like throughout Colombia, like the first like week or two, I was taking interviews from like hostel rooms, and like I think the interviewers could see like that I was from an international connection, and they'd be like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm in Colombia visiting family. Like, well, how you doing? And so like, and I remember like I messed up a couple interviews. Like, I was just not confident in a couple. They would ask me really tough questions, or the rapport wasn't there. So I had a couple of really big mess ups. And one time I even had to cancel an interview because like our bus took too long or something. Like there was definitely a few times where I was like, you know, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I have a job interview and I missed it because I was out partying or like out drinking with my friends. And like, there was a couple moments where I'm like, man, I'm stupid. And so like, eventually I get this you know, this will wrap up the job part of the travels, but I get the job in Colombia, and it was crazy, man. It was the final round of this job interview, and I'm sweating because it's literally 95 degrees in this room, no air conditioning, the window is closed, but all the like cars are like zooming by and they're all super loud, and like my computer's overheating because it has no battery and it's an old computer, so like every time I touch it, it burns me. That thing's about to blow up on me. And like the internet's not that good, and my friends are knocking on the window of the door right here saying like, how's it going? I'm like, shut up, dude, I'm talking to somebody. And like, it was probably the most stressful interview of my life. 5 rounds, over 2 hours. I talked to 5 or 6 different sales directors. And they grilled me about my sales process, like how I do sales, like my experience, how I performed in past jobs. And man, it was gruesome. It was really like, man, I was not just sweating from the heat. Like, I felt like my heart racing because like this was it. Like, now or never, this was the best job offer that I had, or job interview that I had. And I ended up getting the job the next day. They called me back and she's like, we'd love to have you on.
The next day?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's so funny because like I talked to my manager like a few months after I started, and he's like, you want to see the interview notes I had for you? And I was like, of course. And it says at the very bottom, no brainer. And that's when I was like, wow, that made me feel so good.
So when you told us the story at the library, I just remembered I asked you this question. Do you think it was because you had this higher level of energy because you had said yes to this trip? I mean, to me, the way you describe yourself for when you were like down in the dumps, this rock bottom moment, imagine if you had gotten on that interview with that kind of energy, like, can I even do this? Versus that fire in your belly moment. You're living your life in Colombia. You're having fun, high stress, high stakes, but you were confident in it. Do you think that made a difference?
100%. Yeah. 100%.
But don't you think people would say like, oh, you shouldn't go on a vacation like this would be, but you did it in a way, you made the distinction of, I'm not just going vacation to escape. I'm going on vacation with the purpose of getting a freaking job. Like I'm here to get a job. I'm here to get away from that depressive feeling, that depressive environment I was in. I think that played a huge role in that interview.
No, I would 100% agree. And it's so funny because like you would hear that and you would think it's like backwards thinking, where like most people would be like, yeah, go to the library and grind and like take the interview from the library in a safe place. But I think like you said, all those factors built up where it was just like this like moment like where I was like, man, like I feel this like,
yes.
And again, going back to that point of divine intervention, it was just like, why did that Instagram ad show up?
Yeah.
Why did I call my friend? Like, how was it such good timing that like he didn't have a job and my friend had a remote job and we all had our schedules like there was just so many different moving parts that like when I look back at it, I'm like, man, that was like fate, dude. That like I did that. Like,
dude, I agree. Wow. And you said I think you had mentioned that you got to meet a few people on your trip. Like, can you describe, you did the jungle thing. Can you describe that?
Yeah, for sure. So my favorite part about traveling is the people that you meet in the hostels, right? If you haven't been in a hostel yet, it's like very close quarters. Like they're designed to be very social places. You sleep in bunk beds, 6 to 8 people to a room. And man, you just meet some of the like coolest guys. Like I remember in Salento, which is like the coffee region of like Colombia, we met these 2 Dutch guys, and like, man, like one of these dudes was like 6'8", so every time you had to like talk to him, you like broke your neck looking up at him.
Dude,
and
6'8"?
Yeah, yeah, and he was tall, but like, man, we did some like like so much fun stuff together. We played this game called Tejo, which is like what's that beanbag game? Cornhole. But like pretend like the board was like explosive, and if you hit an explosive, it would blow up, and that's how you scored a point. Yeah, it sounds weird, but like you throw this like rock, and if the rock hits the explosive thing, then you score a point. It's filled with gunpowder. It's like a triangle filled with gunpowder. No way. Yeah, so we played that together. And like they were also really like high energy people. Like we went to go do the coffee tour with them, and it was so interesting because like you compare your life in the US versus like their lives in they grew up in this place called Utrecht in Netherlands. And they're like, yeah, man, like we ride our bikes everywhere, and like we love cheese. And I'm like, man, the stereotypes are true. Like, yeah. But we met also a girl named Kate, an Australian girl that my friend ended up dating for a little bit. And she was this girl from Melbourne. She was about 26, 27, and she was a lawyer that like got completely burned out by her job, kind of in the same situation as me, which is why I think we burned out, like, or connected. We were both like down in the dumps about our jobs, and she like just quit her job and said, I'm gonna go take a 6-month-long trip to South America. And we just met in Salento, and she was like this really sweet girl. I ended up meeting up with her again in Dublin like a few months ago because she lives in London. And yeah, she was very, very cultured person. She'd been everywhere in the world you could think of, like Turkey, Thailand, like Malaysia. What? I thought I was well traveled. She has been to like almost every country, like no kidding.
Wow.
And like, yeah, I mean, you just have these like little funny, like a lot of my Instagram followers too, from like, you go down and it's like people that I met at these hostels.
Wow.
And it's yeah, like it's really cool comparing like your life to the lives of people, and like how you just meet for a moment in time and then like separate from there. I think that's one of the coolest parts about like the hostel traveling.
Yeah. So interesting.
Dude, I love that story so much.
Yeah. And the last like main character of this story that I met, okay, so I don't think she's ever going to see this, so I feel like I can like talk about this. But there's this girl named Shira, who is this Israeli girl, okay? And we're in the hostel lobby. Again, it's like 95 degrees, no AC. And we like hear Hebrew, which like at the time, like I didn't speak any Hebrew. I didn't know anything about Israel. Like, and my friend hears it and he recognizes it. He's like, hey, what's up, in Hebrew. And we started talking to these Israeli girls. And I remember one of them, like this really cute one, kept looking at me, and like I was like, damn, like, all right, she's kind of cute, like, you know. And so that night she like Instagram DMs me, and she's like, hey, are you gonna go out tonight? Are you gonna get drinks? So I end up like talking with her for a little bit. And yeah, we actually ended up spending the whole night together. We like went for a little walk, and man, we were like this, like after that conversation. Yeah, and the next day we went on this like boat tour to all these little different islands throughout like the Cartagena like island, what's it called when there's archipelago, all these different islands. And it was this crazy ride. Like, man, I was scared. I thought I was gonna die on this boat. Imagine like the worst quality material of a boat, okay? You want to stuff as many people as you can in that boat, probably like 40 people. You give them $2 life jackets. And then the way that they turned on the boat was they short-circuited a battery to get it running. I'm not kidding you. And I was sitting next to this battery, okay? This is me. This is the wheel, and underneath it, the battery completely exposed to all the water falling in from the boat.
Dude, that is
so
insane.
I am like freaking out, looking at this battery like this is about to, blow up on us.
Yeah.
Like there's no way I'm surviving this boat trip. And they're all in front of us. Like it was me and my friend Adam here, and then Daniel and the two girls in front. And they're just having the time of their life, looking at the scene, looking around. And I see this battery, and I'm like, man, like I hope I don't die. And this guy is also like the worst boatman you've ever seen. He's cranked it up to like as fast as it can go. And this like paper thin boat is just hitting waves every 2 seconds, like boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, oh my God, this thing's about to snap in half. And like, you're going to see this on the news, like 10 Americans died, like tragedy. And I was like, oh my God. So we get to the first island. Okay. And the whole time, like they're trying to upsell us like different things in Spanish, right? I'm the only one in the group who speaks Spanish, by the way.
Huge asset to the group. Massive.
Great. And so they're saying, hey, if you want to go snorkeling, it's another $10. And if you want to do this, and we're like, okay, let's go snorkeling. So we get to this first island they take us to, and we had paid the lady before we got on the boat to go do snorkeling. And they start to confuse us like crazy. So they're like, if you're going to go to snorkeling, stay on the boat, but then get off the boat and then get back on the boat. And I'm like listening, like, what are you guys saying? Like, what? And eventually, like everybody else who also speaks Spanish on the boat is like, wait, should we just get off the boat? So everybody gets off except for us. So it's me, Adam, my friend Daniel, and 2 girls, and then 7 dudes that are like running this operation. And I start to realize, man, we should have got off the boat. Like they have all the power in this situation. Because like I already started arguing with them, like, do we stay on or not for the snorkeling? And he's like, What does that mean? So eventually they start going out into open waters, like away from everything else. And I'm like, dude, oh my God, I'm going to have to like save our lives here.
Yeah.
So we get out and I start to realize, and I think my friend picked up on it too, like I've got this like strapped bag right here with all of our wallets, all of our phones, all of our money. Like they all put it into my bag. And I have the life jacket covering it. And so I started thinking to myself, like, I'm not getting in the water. Like, I'm not leaving these 7 dudes that I don't know with like all of our personal belongings while we're all looking at fishes. Like they just drive away.
Yeah.
So we get out to the open waters and they start haggling us. They're like, all right, it's going to be another $10 to get into the water. And we're like, dude, we already paid. Like, we're not paying you any more money. And they start to get pretty aggressive with us and like start yelling at us. And I'm like, dude, this is sketchy. Like we need to get out of here as soon as possible. And this starts to piss off like my friend Adam, and he starts yelling back at them. Keep in mind, these are 7 dudes and it is 3 guys and 2 girls. We are not winning this fight. Yeah. We are going to end up at the bottom of the ocean if we just like don't give them money. And so he starts yelling at them, and then the girls start to get mad and they're yelling at them too. And like, keep in mind, they don't speak Spanish. They don't speak English. None of this is communicating across anybody. And so I start to think to myself, like my heart's racing because I realize the gravity of the situation. Yeah. Like we might get held for ransom, like actually. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, man, I have to just like negotiate with these guys to take us back. So I like on the surface, I was like very calm, kind of sitting like this, talking like this. But like inside, I thought I was like, God. So eventually I tell them, I'm like, who's the captain of the boat? And the guy's like, he's like, what you want? And I'm like, listen, I'm going to put it to you very, very easily. We're not going to pay you any more money, okay? We paid our money at the very beginning. We didn't bring any more cash, okay? You guys are being stupid by asking us because we only have credit cards. And I told, like, that's all we brought. So how are you going to swipe the credit card, right?
Was that true?
Yeah.
That was true. So you didn't have any cash on
I didn't have, no, because we swiped our cards at the beginning before we even got on the boat. And so I'm like, look, if you want to take us back to the other island, we'll swipe our cards, we'll go to the aquarium, but we are not paying you any more money. Take it or leave it. Like that's all I'm going to give you. Mm-hmm. And so he starts like talking with the other guys and they're still yelling. And so I grab Adam, like, dude, shut up. Let me do this. Mm-hmm. And so the guys start talking. They're like, give us the credit cards. I was like, no, I'm not giving you anything. Mm-hmm. He's like, give us the credit cards. And I was like, no, like take us back to the island and I'll swipe, I'll pay you. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, they start speaking like a local tongue to each other.
So you couldn't...
So I couldn't understand.
Dang.
And he was like... And they turn around the boat and they start going back to the island.
That's wild.
Dude, you saved the day.
Dude, I was freaking out. We get back to the island and I get off and I'm like shaking.
Yeah.
Like
Your adrenaline's going crazy.
I was going crazy. And so like, and then I grab Adam by the shirt. He's also, by the way, he's like a 6'2" dude. Like he played O-line, I think in high school. And I grab him, I'm like, dude, don't you ever talk with these guys ever again. Like if we're ever in a situation like this, like shut up and let me do it.
Yeah.
And like, man, like I started like, I had to like sit down and collect myself because like that was actually like the most stressful moment of my life. Like was trying to get these guys, like these like 7 Caribbean dudes to like calm down and like not hold us for ransom.
Gosh.
And so like, yeah. And then we pet the little turtles and stuff and like went on our merry way. And then I thought I was going to die on the way back too with like the boat. I sat next to the battery again. So yeah, that was the time I almost got kidnapped kind of.
What a story.
All right, everyone go travel.
I got robbed in like the next day too.
What?
Yeah.
Now you got to tell us that story too.
Yeah, so I was like walking on the street with Shira, and like it was a busy street, like everybody whatever, and it was like 5 o'clock. Like you're not supposed to walk like alone at night or even like with another person. So it was like about dinner time, and whenever you're in Cartagena, there's a lot of people that come up to you and they're like, hey, like blah blah blah, give me money, and it's usually in like a broken English. So like I would just speak to them in Spanish and they would go away because they recognize like I'm not in on the bit. And so this guy comes up to me and he's like, hey, like, hey, you got money? I'm like in Spanish and tell him like, no, go away. He's like, you got money? I was like, no, go away. And he's like, now you got money? And he puts a knife like right here, so I feel like the blade of a knife, and he's like, if you don't give me your money right now, I'm gonna stab you. Excuse my language, sorry.
It's okay.
But, like,
we can bleep it out.
But I was like, oh my, like, and I start shaking again. I'm like, oh, not this again. So I'm like no, like go away. And he's like, I will stab you I swear. And I have like again my crossbody bag. I've got my phone in one pocket, cash in another, wallet in another, and I start like, and by the way, she doesn't notice this is going on. Like she just thinks I'm like messing with the guy, and we're just like walking, and the guy's like holding my thing, and I just go back and forth. I'm like, please don't. I just start like begging, like, please don't do this to me. Like I don't have any money. He's like, give me the bag then, and I was like, I can't do that. Like please, like leave me alone. And so he digs it deeper and he starts like break skin, and I like jump, and I'm like, all right. So then I open up like the bag. And I have like 50,000 like Colombian pesos, which is like $12. And I like, and I pull it out and I'm just like, all right, here you go away. And he's like, no, give me the bag. And I was like, I'm not giving you the bag. And then he does it again. And I'm like, dude, go. And I like yell at him and she turns as well. And then like a few of the cops like down the street, like hear me yell. And then they like turn around and start to look. And so the guy like rips the cash like out of my hand and he runs away. And then she's like, what just happened? And I'm like, I just got robbed, dude. And so like, and then like I get over to the police and they're like, are you okay? And I was like, I mean, I don't know, you look. And then there's just like a little wound right here and it was like bleeding.
What?
Yeah.
Dude. That is wild, man.
Yeah.
That is wild. I would feel very uncomfortable in that situation because I am like completely uncultured, first of all, and also like do not speak Spanish fluently. So that's like actually one of my fears of like going overseas and stuff like that is being taken advantage of. I think that's a lot of people's probably like that holds them back. Like, is there any like tips or tricks you have for people that aren't as cultured as you and don't speak Spanish on going on trips like that?
Just don't mess with the wrong people. I'd say like keep to yourself, and like if you do have like if you get that feeling, like I would say trust your gut more than anything, right? Like if you see like a sketchy like taxi like come up to you, like don't get in. Like only take Ubers if you're in Colombia. Like don't go out at night. Like just like things that like you wouldn't do in a bad neighborhood in the U.S. I think would apply.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can make it.
You guys would do just fine.
I need to take a trip like that though, like just out of the country. I've never been like over the Atlantic.
Yeah, I would love to go to Europe sometime in
yeah.
the next few years. Be really cool.
Yeah.
What would you recommend the first place? Because I don't know, I might have asked you this. What do you recommend is the first place you go if you've never been to Europe before?
That's a really good question. I would say, man, Italy.
Really?
Yeah.
I think you might have said Switzerland too.
Switzerland's my favorite country to go to,
okay.
but it's also really expensive. So it's like not a really viable option to like to do if you could only pick one, I would say. And there's more things to do in Italy too.
And so Switzerland, you said Switzerland has been your favorite place to go.
Yeah.
Didn't you tell us a story about you guys backpacking in Switzerland?
Yeah, on the Alps, dude.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Gosh, that's so sick.
That was crazy. Yeah, so like it was like this, so we did this like 2 week long trip throughout like Italy, and so we get to like Switzerland like broke and tired, like we've just been like partying and stuff in Italy, and like now we have to like hike the Alps, like, you know, we're working on like maybe like 6 hours of sleep over like the last week collectively.
Oh my gosh.
And so like we show up to like Switzerland, and I knew it was going to be like a rough time because like the first thing I see is Burger King in the train station. Do you want to guess how much a Whopper meal is in Switzerland? Just take a wild guess.
Well, like what?
$15?
Yeah. 20.
20? 25?
30.
Like $25 for a Whopper meal. So I'm like, all right,
But
dude.
like burger and fries? Like
Burger, fries, and a drink is like 25 US dollars. Yeah.
that's crazy.
So I'm like, you know, we're like broken tired, and we're like, man, this is gonna be a long one. But it's like, it's so beautiful. There's this place called Interlaken, and it's like at the foot of the Alps, and we stayed in this like cabin hostel. And like we start looking at this map, and there's like all these different routes you can take, and like all these different mountains you can climb. And we end up doing like the cheapest route to like, instead of starting at the top and working our way down, like we started at the bottom and worked our way up, which nobody does. So we were the only 3 people on this like hike. We thought we got like lost or something because we didn't see anyone for like hours. I was like, all right, we might like, you know, we might evaporate on the Alps, like low key, and it's like raining too.
Yeah.
And I was wearing these pants actually, and these shoes. I hiked. Yeah, these are the
No
same
way.
shoes.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe the same shirt actually. I don't know. But yeah. So like we were hiking. It's raining. It's muddy. Like I also have a torn meniscus, and I had a torn meniscus back then. And so like I was wearing a knee brace, so it was like really hard for me to like do these like weird movements and stuff. And like we fell a couple times. We're all like muddy and like, you know, messed up. And eventually you reach this point after like climbing like upwards for like an hour, you're like out of breath, and it's just like you're in the clouds. And like it's like, man, it's one of those moments where you just like have to sit there and like you don't even talk to each other. It's just like, whoa, dude. Like, this is crazy.
Man.
I've obviously never done like Mount Everest or anything, but I'm sure it would be like that kind of feeling where it's like this is like the top of the world almost.
Dang.
Gosh, dude.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, well, is there anything else that you have any questions? You have any questions? Because that was pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for
Appreciate you coming on.
yeah,
man.
yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to make it happen. I knew that you would be a great guest because of your travels, and you're just a really unique person, and you're okay with you're a great critical thinker. You're okay with asking other people questions that you don't know. And I don't think a lot of people are. You're courageous enough, you're confident enough to be like, you know, what is like this whole Christianity thing? What is it about? Or I don't know how to describe some things that you're asking. Like that takes someone who's okay in their own skin. And those are the kind of people we want to hang out with at this future coffee shop. So
For sure.
I'm glad to have you on, and we'll link up your Instagram and in the description, and so people can reach out, DM them, let them know what you think. If you have any travel questions,
Yeah.
can they hit you up if they have any travel
for sure,
questions
for
some
sure.
advice, places to go, things to see?
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out.
Peace.
I want to talk to you. Not now, later. No, now.